for one more question?
Yes, we'll encourage the question to be short and the answer to be
it will
brief
be
as well,
short.
but yes.
Considering what the President has done speaking in Geneva and other times his outlandish comments, there's been speculation that a lot of that's done because his group represents about 30% of the population of Iran and 70% that he's doing this to keep the focus away from his internal problems and the problems he's creating, and by demonizing other places and other countries, it deflects from this. Or is he just as mean-spirited as he sounds?
Well, I mean, you said it right. I mean, all the Iranian attempts to acquire nuclear weapons and really bringing that to the international table is really to hide the human rights violation. So it's harder for international community to focus on so many issues. So there's so many things that could be done, and that's one thing is we always call upon is make sure that this doesn't hide the real acts of torture and genocide that's been happening in Iran, and especially with the comments that Ahmadinejad is making is making sure that the focus is diverted from one issue to the another. And as you can always see, he has they are great in this, as that they always disturb a conference like Durban that's aimed to really promote togetherness and toleration, but they're just acting as if they're really there to do something else, and which they are. But yes, I mean it's been done, and that's their intention.
All right, thank you very much. Our next questioner is David Sweet from the Conservatives.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And you know, the more that we go through the chapters of Ahmadinejad and the Guardian Council and the Ayatollahs, the more it takes quite a stout heart to stay dignified and diplomatic around this. The treatment of individuals in Iran, minorities as well as Persians themselves, is of course appalling, and there's just not a lot of English words that I could express that to talk about the tyranny that people face in Iran. But you mentioned two incidences, and I thought I would just give you an opportunity because one of your first points is to keep the behavior of this regime exposed, because their tyranny does not stay within the bounds, the geographic bounds of Iran, but in fact they export their tyranny internationally. And you mentioned 1989, where Dr. Ghazemlou and two aides were assassinated, and you also mentioned the 1992 assassination in Berlin as well, and this was Dr. Ghazemlou's successor. Can you just give us some more information on you've mentioned 50,000 Kurds have been killed in the history, and can you give us some more information on these assassinations of political leaders?
Well, just to make it clear, I'm not saying I don't want to be interpreted as I'm saying that Ahmadinejad is representing the Persian minority or the Persian people. I think Ahmadinejad is really not representing anybody. I don't think they have back within the 5 or 10% of the population in terms of core hardcore supporters. So Persians as well as everybody else is oppressed, but the oppression within the minorities is double or sometimes triple. As in regards to these two instances, Iran in the early revolution was able to not only exporting the revolution, but also hunting down people who actually gone abroad. There have been chain killings inside Iran of opposition groups, and we've seen this, and probably you heard it, and there are also chain killing outside Iran. And unfortunately, we were victims of this chain killing to our two high-level delegations of our leadership, who were attending an international conference of the Social Internationals, one in Berlin, one in Vienna in 1989, and one in Berlin in 1992. They're both assassinated by the Iranian agents, one on negotiation table. So they were sitting in front of the Iranian negotiators, and the negotiators actually acted as terrorists, and they were carrying guns, so they kill them on the negotiation tables. And their evidence, and unfortunately the Austrian government has not really put forward the case because of the international and the commercial interests of the Austrian government. So Austrian government, despite finding out that yes, they were the actual killers, but they let them go and they went them back. They sent them back to Iran, and still that case has not been opened, and still that case has not been really put forward and carried forward because of the commercial interest between Iran and Austria, and that's quite fact. This is quite sad, despite a lot of efforts that put into place to really uncover this. But the good thing about the 1992 assassination is that the German authorities allowed the German courts to actually. They were not only the authorities were able to detain people who actually did the killing in Berlin in 1992. There were 4 people that were killed, again, just like on a table like this, where there were people talking together, and then they just stormed the meeting room, and then they just killed the Kurdish, our leaders, then in 1992. But the German authorities were able to go after them. They were able to capture the actual killers, and they were sent, one of them, the main of them, who was working for the Iranian embassy in Germany, was sent to 25 years in prison, but then, because the act happened in 1992, and in 2007, after spending 15 years due to German law, he was sent back to Iran, and he was welcomed by the Iranian leaders in Iran. So this is quite, despite working, really making sure, but still they were able to send him back and welcoming him. So, and then the 50,000, Iran, since the revolutions, there have been a lot of unrest to really bring about change and democracy, because the revolution wasn't for these mullahs and these clerics to take place. The revolution was to really get rid of a monarch who was very despotic, very autocratic, and very repressive as well. And the people came out, but unfortunately these mullahs, these clerics, were able to take over and to hijack the revolution. So many people like us, the Kurds and other minorities, were very engaged and active in making sure that the mullahs do not take control. And it was a power struggle. So the Kurds in Iran, we struggled for quite 15 years after the revolution, till 1995, making sure that the mullahs do not have their ways, and make sure that the revolution that we paid dearly for it, make sure it actually gets somewhere. And during the process of 15 years, the Iranian Islamic forces, and especially the IRGC, which is the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, were heavily suppressing and doing killings. I mean, there are instances where actually they stormed a village and they killed about 50, 60 people, just civilian. And there are documented in Iran and outside Iran of such a killing in the early revolutions. So the 50,000 were actually stemmed from these acts of terror within the first 15 years of Iranian establishment. And I think there are a lot of credible documents and evidences that can actually support these allegations.
Thank you, Mr. Behruz. And by the way, if for some reason I didn't make myself clear in my preamble, I don't think that Ahmadinejad or the Guardian Council or the Ayatollahs represent anybody either. I think every person in Iran outside of the government is subject to great persecution and tyranny, and is, at least certainly that's the evidence that we've seen before this committee, unless of course they agree totally with that regime. And then they're fine, but any kind of resistance or disagreement seems to be met with that kind of thing. I do want to have you, if you could do subsequently to the committee meeting today, if you could submit to the chairman. You had mentioned a number of organizations that you feel that our government should be wary of, and rather than go through a list here, but if you could submit that, you were talking about international travel, then that would be good. But my last question to you is, you had mentioned an association of minorities that is having some success internationally, as well as educating those people in Tehran that you feel are, how would I say, less apt to speak out against the government, the regime in Iran. And you seem to have some kind of feeling of optimism for the future. And yet it's still a very serious situation. So I just wanted to say, is that true? Am I getting that from you, that you feel like there's some movement because of the consistent pressure that's being put on internally?
Well, as I said, I mean, these increasing human rights violations is because there are activism, and these activists are using different means and tools to make sure that they're heard. And these activisms are within the Persians, within the Kurds, Azeris, Baluchis, and within everybody. But because of the repression and the crackdown on the ethnic and ethnic minorities is quite widespread. So right now, due to many changes has happened in the region, as I said, people are a lot more optimistic, and we do not welcome a regime change by force or by international player, just like it happened in Iraq. But definitely, if it's in the assistance and the benefit of the Iranian people, we welcome. We rather be done with this regime and have something starts from fresh. But definitely, we want to do it. Make sure it's done in the most cost-effective in terms of human life, and that's what this organization that we set up. It's an organization that promotes peace, that promotes tolerance, coexistence, and mostly it's done to lobby outside world to make sure that they understand what really Iran is about. And Iran is not only Persians, and Iran is not only, and the current Islamic regime does not represent the Iranian population. So it's kind of giving that awareness, or at least providing that awareness to the international community, as well as giving some hope to the activists inside Iran, to making sure that there are organizations that actually support them, and there are alternatives that could be sought. So, and in that regards, both people in Iran have some optimism, and as well, because of the increased activities within Iran among the population, we see we're more optimistic that yes, a better change could happen. But again, sooner or later, that's really not very definite.
Thank you, Mr. Behruz.
Thank you, Mr. Sweet. We now turn to our second round of questions. The question and answers here must be no more than 5 minutes. So we go to the Liberals, Mr. Scarpaleggia or Mr. Silva?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to again thank for all the different comments that was made throughout the meeting, and to go back to some of the issues that we're talking about, particularly about the persecution of the Kurds in relation to the language rights. And I'm wondering whether there is are there a possibility for the Kurds, for example, to be able to watch a television program in their own language or be educated in their own language if they choose to. How bad has it gone over the years? Is it something that always existed in terms of discrimination in relation to the Kurds and their religion and their language rights?
Since the early days of the revolution, and since this regime came to power, there's always been one official language, and that's been placed even during the previous regime. And the official language system, teaching or educational language, has been Persian. But the Iranian Islamic constitution, again, which is in writing is in compliance with many forms and norms, but in action, really, it hasn't been put to action. Like in Iranian constitution, there is an article in Iranian constitution that allows Iranian minorities, national and ethnic and religious minorities, to practice their religion and to be educated in their mother tongue. But we've seen in the last 30 years otherwise, something totally different, and not only nothing has been done in that regard, and it's there to really to be on paper. But since the early revolution, the situation of the minorities has always been as it is, and in terms of as in regards to their educational rights, and whether they're allowed to watch programs, as I said, I mean, gladly the technological advance, especially the advance of satellite. Kurds right now enjoy the freedom to watch maybe 10, 15 Kurdish satellite stations that have nothing to do with the government. They're actually run outside the borders, and it helps a lot in many ways that people at least can watch news and programs and shows in their own language, and have not only a different perspective but also practice their own language as well. So there's many ways this has brought it has helped the situation. But the government has also tried to open up some, for example, Kurdish programs, but always propagate their policies, and you know how they do it. So, but again, it's always been there since the revolutions, and it still continues.
Now, I hear that the Kurdish speaking part of Iraq is very thriving and it's doing quite well. Is there been a movement by the Iranian government to, in fact, to destabilize the Kurdish region also in Iraq?